This is a Sports Catastrophe production. Hey there, hello there. It's Jeff Carter. I welcome you to another Sports Catastrophe on this day. And on this day, October the 30th, 2021. Wow, it happened 28 years ago. A miracle happened for fans who hated the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Leafs lost their first game of the 93-94 season. But there was a special season. It was a special season in a sense, for many reasons. So, in proper context, well, I gotta say this, that this was the first time the Leafs lost after winning 10 straight games. They won 10 straight games. Well, one was in overtime, but, still. Anyway, so, the 92-93 Toronto Maple Leafs shocked a lot of people by doing better than expected. They were in a rebuilding phase. Cliff Fletcher was brought in to be the new general manager. Pat Burns was brought in to be the coach. And the Leafs, who were always sucking, trying to get out of the Harold Ballard era that saw them in the 80s become a terrible team. Made a few playoff appearances because of how crappy the division was. But still, the Leafs were much better in 92-93. And the 93 season was huge. The Leafs put up almost 100 points. That ended up being third in the division behind Chicago and Detroit. While Toronto was playing Detroit in the 93 season, the 93 playoffs, and winning Game 7 thanks to Nikolai Borshevsky, who came back from injury, and he kept saying unbelievable. Of course, he doesn't know much English. The Chicago Blackhawks were shocked in the first round by the St. Louis Blues in 4 straight. St. Louis would face Toronto for the division title, if you will, and a spot in the conference finals. However, St. Louis did not make it easy on Toronto. Toronto did win on the double overtime Doug Gilmour goal in Game 1, which was epic. However, Toronto needed Game 7, and they won 6-0, so that's good. Then the Leafs took on the Kings in the conference finals, taking on Wayne Gretzky and his bunch of merry men. Game 1 was controversial because of a hit on Gilmour by Martin McSorley, which Wendell Clark said, "Fuck it, I'm going to fight this guy." And Pat Burns wanted to beat the tar out of Barry Melrose, which ironically was Wendell Clark's first cousin. Anyway, the Leafs had a 3-2 series lead thanks to Glenn Anderson's overtime goal. And in Game 6 at the Great Western Forum, Wendell Clark put up a hat trick of epic proportions because that saved the Leafs from losing in regulation. Sadly, though, overtime happened and Doug Gilmour got accidentally clipped by Gretzky's high stick. No penalty was called, not even a 2-minute minor. And worst of all, Gretzky scored the overtime winning goal. And Gretzky put up a hat trick in Game 7 of the conference finals to give the Kings the conference title and a trip to the Stanley Cup Finals in 93. But Montreal did have some form of normalcy, winning the series in 5. Anyway, the Toronto Maple Leafs were trying to deal with a lot of things and hopefully trying to have a strong season. David Rhodes would be the new backup goaltender after Darren Pupa left to Tampa. There were a few other moves, I believe. But anyhow, the Leafs started off their season in prime fashion. Before the season, not a lot of trades. Well, the Leafs would give up Mike Foligno in November 93 to Florida for cash. And the Leafs would pick up Mike Garner from the Rangers for Glenn Anderson. The Leafs still were a decent player and all that. So the Leafs started off their season at home against the Dallas Stars and crushed Dallas 6-3. It was one of I believe the first game that Dallas as the Dallas Stars, because Minnesota, they've been the Minnesota North Stars before they left in 93 thanks to Norm Green's greediness, sent them to Dallas. So anyhow, that's not the point. The point is that the Leafs were 1-0. Next up was the Chicago Blackhawks, the powerful Blackhawks, which the Leafs won 2-1 thanks to Felix Patan's goaltending. And then they went to the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, and beat the Flyers 5-4. It was a tight game. 3 days later, on the 13th of October, they took on Washington and crushed them 7-1. And then 2 nights later, they were hosting Detroit in the first of a home and home. They won the game 6-3 at home and then won 2-1 at the Joe against the Red Wings, who would be the best team in the conference that year. And then they crushed Hartford and Divine Powder 7-2. And then they were on their way for a 5-game road trip. They would play the 2 Florida teams, the Panthers and the Lightning. The Panthers, the expansion Panthers, of course, and Tampa, the second-year squad. And winning 4-3 in overtime against the Panthers and 2-0 against Tampa. That made it 9 straight. And then when they beat the Blackhawks at Chicago Stadium 4-2, it was amazing. They had just started 10-0. But of course, all good things had to end. And Montreal crushed them 5-2 thanks to Patty Waugh and crew. The Leafs actually would not lose a home game till November 13th, 1993 against the Blackhawks. So they played, in their 10-game winning streak, they played 5 at home, 5 on the road. So they won 5. They beat Florida. They beat Philadelphia to make it 7 straight. And then they lost to the Blackhawks to finally lose a playoff game. I mean, to lose one on home turf. The Leafs would end up with 98 points. Surprisingly, only 2 points back of Detroit for the division and the top conference spot. Tops in the division. Conference. I thought Detroit had more. So the Leafs only lost by 2 points. Now you'd be thinking, okay, great. Toronto's got the 2 seat in the conference. Wrongo. Because the NHL decided to say that the division winners, like the 4 division winners, would be 1-2 within their conference. So despite the fact that the Leafs were the second best team in the conference, they got the 3 seed because Calgary won in the other division. So it could have been the Leafs versus the Canucks in the first round of that 94 playoffs. Dallas only was 1 back of Toronto with 97 points, so that was a shocker. St. Louis ended up with 91. Chicago ended up with 87. So 5 of the 8 teams that went to the playoffs in the Western Conference with the new system from 1 to 8 by points. The Central had 5 of them. And the funny thing is, they had two playoff matches all themselves. Toronto, Chicago, and Dallas, St. Louis were interdivision playoff matches when they were not supposed to be. Detroit would take on San Jose in the only playoff series in the Western Conference in 94 that had teams from both divisions. But of course, the NHL had a crazy rule in 94 and 95 that if the Central and Pacific teams would face each other in a playoff series, they would do a 2-3-2 format for the playoffs instead of the normal 2-2-1-1-1, which meant that the Sharks were hosting games 3, 4, and 5 on their ice after Detroit started games 1 and 2 on their ice. 6 and 7 would be at the other team's arena. And guess what? It happened to the Leafs. I mean, yeah, the Leafs took care of the Blackhawks. Then the Leafs had to face the Sharks and do the 2-3-2 system. And it almost ruined the Leafs. The Leafs were down 3-2 headed home. But thankfully, though, they knew they had Game 6 and 7 at Maple Leaf Gardens, and they won in overtime in Game 6, and then won 4-2 in Game 7 to move on. And, of course, they did the 2-3-2 again with the Canucks. Because the first 2 games were at Maple Leaf Gardens, and then the next 3 were at Pacific Coliseum. So, yeah. But the Leafs, it was a terrible season for them overall. I mean, losing to the Canucks, who were the 7th seed. So, so Felix Ponton and Damien Rhodes were goaltenders. The defensemen were Sylvain Lefebvre, Bob Rouse, Dave Ellett, Dmitry Mironov, Todd Gill, Matt Morden, Jamie McCowan, and Drake Berehowski. The main offensive players were Glenn Anderson, Mike Gardner, Rob Pearson, Dave Vanacek, Nikolai Borshevsky, Wendell Clark, Mark Osborne, Mike Krushelewski, Mike Foligno, Ken Manderville, John Cullen, Peter Sezel, Mike Eastwood, a young Yannick Perrault, and Doug Gilmour. So the Leafs didn't do that badly. I mean, they were still pretty decent and all that. But at the end, it just didn't work out for them. Kind of sucks, don't you think? Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.